Hi friends, happy Monday, happy autumn. Welcome to the fall equinox happening this weekend. I just love this time of year. I was talking to a few of my patients this last week, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like the transition from like summer season to fall season feels more like a new year than the beginning of the new year, right? In January, and like the dead ass of winter, right? It just feels like the natural changing of the seasons. I know for a lot of people it feels very liberating, right? It's like we feel kind of refreshed, we feel like motivated, we feel like we want to kind of declutter and get some things out of our life, right? So if you're feeling that, you're not alone. I'm with you. I kind of feel like the summer to fall transition just feels like a lot of newness, and like I said, the changing of the seasons does really match a lot of our intrinsic hormonal patterns as well too. So if you're feeling kind of, like I said, extra vivacious, extra motivated, extra curious, and ready to kind of, like I said, tackle a new season, I'm with you. And we're welcoming fall with like all of the sweaters and all of the pumpkin things. So you're in good company. If that's your vibe, you're talking to a fellow autumn here, so we love it. But today, welcome to another episode of Learn with Flo. I know that there's quite a few followers that have joined us, and so if you're new here, welcome. Our Monday Learn with Flo sessions are an awesome time for us to really be able to sit down, have a longer form chat versus just quick soundbite medicine. I like to use this as an opportunity to do kind of my version of a live podcast. I love video. I think it's really impactful to kind of see verbal and nonverbal body language. And also with this, if you're able to join us live for any of our Instagram lives here, you can ask questions, right? They pop up right in the chat. And so I like to have an opportunity where we can make it interactive, make it fun, and really have an opportunity to talk about, like I said, some very relevant topics in the world of nutrition, gut health, hormone balance, functional medicine, mind-body medicine. And if, like I said, you're just joining us or kind of learning about me and learning about the Lowdown, you know that here at the Lowdown, we are working with a lot of individuals more on the fringe of conventional healthcare, right? Individuals that haven't gotten answers from conventional healthcare, or really individuals that are looking for options outside of the traditional medicine model, right? So I work with a lot of individuals, males and females, that are struggling with hormone imbalances, gut health issues, autoimmune disease, skin issues, brain fog, excessive fatigue, poor relationship with food and body image issues, anxiety, depression. I mean, you name it, right? So it's individuals that have felt like they've kind of fallen through the cracks of the conventional healthcare model, or they've gone through the gamut of practitioner to practitioner and specialist to specialist within more of the insurance-based model, and have come to find out pretty quickly that it's not actually their provider that's determining their care, but it's probably more of their insurance provider that's determining their care, right? And so with that, here at the Lowdown, we're able to kind of bust through a lot of those plateaus and give people options that they're not able to get, and also have conversations that are more around our body's natural physiology. How are we using nutrition to change hormones? How are we leaning into lifestyle patterns? How are we leaning into movement, nervous system regulation, connection with nature, mind-body medicine, right? I always say, like, if it's found outside of a pharmaceutical bottle, then I probably use it, right? We're going to use those types of natural healing modalities. So one of the biggest topics that tends to come up a lot in my space is nutrition, right? And in the nutrition space, I'm a very food forward practitioner. I like to use food as one of our main streams and one of the foundational pieces of our healing treatment plans, not bypassing it, but also not just using your run of the mill elimination diets, right? That's not life. That's not working with the human behind the diet, right? So when we talk about nutrition, it's very common that different diet strategies will come up in our conversations, right? What's the latest and the greatest? What's the most innovative thing? Whether people are talking about keto or paleo or intermittent fasting, gluten-free, dairy-free, I mean, you name it, I hear about it, right? And one of the biggest things I wanted to really talk about today, because I think that On the surface, it kind of sounds very aligned to more of the functional medicine model, but at a deeper look, there's some major gaps that people are definitely noticing and falling through the gaps, but people aren't talking about it, right? And what is that diet strategy that I want to talk about? I want to talk about this concept of intuitive eating, right? Intuitive eating, if you're not familiar with it, it is a style of dieting, but one might call it anti-dieting, that was developed by two registered dietitians that started back in the 1980s, right? So it's definitely had some longevity behind it. And the principles behind intuitive eating are slightly different than your run-of-the-mill kind of diets, right? They were kind of the first people that came out and wanted to really be anti-diet culture because they saw a lot of the disordered eating patterns, a lot of the stress, and a lot of the overwhelm created by more of your traditional diets of the world that got popular around the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, right? A lot of crash dieting. So if you're not familiar with intuitive eating, I want to kind of talk about like what is intuitive eating, because really what I want to dive into and give the platform to today is talking about the unspoken harms behind intuitive eating that nobody's talking about, right? We're kind of getting this like glamorous thing on the front end and maybe not a whole lot of actual application on the back end for people that feel like this doesn't really apply to them. So this will make sense as we kind of get into it, but I think in order for it to make sense, we all have to be on the same page of like, what is intuitive eating? Because if you're not in my space, whether that's like being kind of immersed in the health and wellness fields on a daily basis, or you're not a practitioner that has worked with a variety of different individuals through a variety of different nutrition styles, then you may not even really understand like what intuitive eating is. And then when we kind of get into it, you'll start to understand where the cracks and the holes might be for somebody that doesn't really fit into that model. So very, very quickly at a high level, I think this is important enough to spend some time on it for a second. What are the 10 principles of intuitive eating, right? Because you'll hear some good stuff in here. But then as you start to kind of peel back the layers, you'll start to see pretty quickly, if you're someone like myself, you work with individuals, maybe you're a fellow practitioner, whether you currently use nutrition in your treatment strategies or you're curious about learning more in order to introduce nutrition treatment into your strategies, this will be very, very helpful for you. So what is intuitive eating? 10 principles. Principle number 1, reject diet culture. Enough said, right? I don't think that needs too much explanation, except for like you're starting to see that intuitive eating is very anti-diet culture, right? Anti-following a certain plan, anti-having borders or structure, right? It's like if it's a diet or diet culture, someone is telling you what to eat, how much to eat, when to eat, like reject it, right? So principle number 1, reject diet culture. Okay, pretty straightforward. Principle number 2, and this one's one we'll go back time and time again, honor your hunger is a big part of the intuitive eating strategy. So keeping your body biologically fed, which we love, with adequate energy, adequate carbohydrates, adequate protein. Otherwise, you can trigger some of these kind of primal stress patterns that drive into overeating, right? One of the principles behind intuitive eating is really understanding your hunger scale, right? And not letting yourself get over hungry or allowing yourself to eat to over fullness or uncomfortable fullness. So you a lot of times will see the hunger scale on a scale of 1 to 10 associated with intuitive eating patterns. So something around intuitive eating, principle number 2 is learning how to honor your hunger and learning how to honor that signal of hunger as rebuilding the trust with food, right? So principle number 1, reject diet culture. Principle number 2, honor your hunger. Principle number 3, make peace with food. Really just saying that we don't want to have any foods that are bad or good, or removing like morality labels associated with food, right? Seems really great on the surface. I would agree. There's more. Principle number 4, discover the satisfaction factor. So by providing this experience, you'll be able to find that you'll eat just the right amount of food to feel physically and emotionally satisfied, right? So you're hearing a lot of these intuitive strategies around listening to your body, honoring your hunger, eating to a moderate amount of fullness. Like, how do we get physically full, but how do we also balance this like emotional satisfaction as well too? Principle number 6, feel your fullness, right? You're noticing a theme, right? Listen to the signals that your body tells you that you're no longer hungry, even if that's pausing in the middle of your meal and kind of checking in, or being able to pause at certain moments and recognize fullness, even if there's still food on the plate, right? So again, we're at principle number 6, and pretty much all 6 principles up until this point have very much been geared around listening to hunger fullness cues, honoring hunger fullness cues, finding the sweet spot between too much hunger and not feeling emotionally or physically satisfied, or eating to levels of like uncomfortable fullness. Number 6, challenge the food police, which is very similar to rejecting diet culture, essentially challenging individuals that say you can't eat this or you shouldn't eat that, like challenging that and recognizing that all foods fit and that you can eat anything as long as you are able to honor your hunger and honor your fullness. All foods fit. Principle number 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. So again, with intuitive eating, there's lots of help with understanding how our emotions play into our cravings and how certain individuals will use food in an emotional standpoint. That's not a bad thing. That is totally primal biological patterns, because food provides, I always call it an exhale for the body, right? No matter what, like we eat and the body's like, oh, bless. Thank God we have food, we have fuel on board for at least the next few hours. It just acts as a giant exhale. Now, some people, like I said, we get conditioned to use food in different ways, right? To kind of seek that exhale or kind of seek that release as well too. Principle number 9 and 10 are about movement and about honoring your health, right? So movement in a way that isn't about calories or changing your body, and also principles around gentle nutrition, which is accepting your body in all shapes and sizes and accepting your body in all forms, right? So all of these things are good stuff, right? You hear about these like 10 principles of intuitive eating, a lot of it being able to like drop in, listen to natural hunger fullness cues, be able to reject diet culture. Don't let anybody tell you that there's foods that you can and cannot eat, like all foods fit. Being able to move your body in a way that isn't intended towards changing your body, and also eating in a way that isn't designed towards intentionally changing your body, right? It's like, I'm not eating in a certain way because I am intentionally trying to lose weight, or intentionally try to gain muscle, or intentionally try to change anything about my health. It's just accepting my body exactly how it is and loving my body exactly how it is. So when I hear about those 10 principles of intuitive eating, I dig a lot of them, right? I'm like, yes, I'm like, we have some good pieces going here, especially to have some of those more intuitive hits and be able to drop in and listen to the body. But I can expand on this also, and I can say that working in the health space, especially in the women's health space, for going on, like 15 years now, and supporting thousands of women, many women, including myself, through the process of using things like intuitive eating principles as a major cover-up for some deep disordered eating patterns, right? Whether we're conscious of it at the time or not, and that's okay, right? It's all about like kind of like the gentle call outs. We all need those friends in our lives that are like, what are we using this to overcome? What are we using this to like not talk about, right? So women don't necessarily need, a lot of times what I'm finding, especially individuals that are looking to change their health for the better, they're looking to remove a lot of their hormone imbalance symptoms. They want to put their autoimmune disease into remission. They don't want to be the 5th generation of their family with cardiovascular disease and diabetes, right? And I just truly believe that we're in such a time and a culture where we, especially as women, we can handle like the facts, right? It's like, give me the facts. Like, I don't necessarily need a lot of the fluffy clickbait type of stuff just to know how to like eat intuitively, right? Women, we do need to learn how our bodies work, right? We absolutely need the facts. What's the science? And a lot of times once we understand the facts and the science and we learn how to work with our body, not against it, the intuitive eating piece, it kind of just falls into play, right? But if we try to do things out of order of operations and we try to kind of force this intuitive eating piece while there's still a lot of physiological chaos going on, a lot of stress, a lot of inflammation, a lot of hormone imbalances, a lot of gut issues, a lot of toxin burden, a lot of circadian rhythm disruption. Like, if there's a lot of physiological stuff that has not yet been dealt with, and we try to layer in this like intuitive eating component, we tend to miss the mark, right? And that's what I'll kind of use a lot of our time explaining, because a huge part of learning how our body works is actually a deep unlearning because there's been so much garbage, just straight up garbage misinformation that is pushed in conventional health as well as modern wellness space for decades, right? Just straight up giving women like false information about how to eat or how to move that's not even in alignment with how their natural physiology works, right? So it's like, how are we preaching intuitive eating to a body that's like so far away from its own intuitive patterns? Like, of course it's not going to work, right? So as a leading root cause practitioner in this space, I'm going to tell you what your body actually needs to thrive. Like, how does your body work at the surface? Because intuitive eating does sound great in theory, but, and while most people can benefit from a lot of this information, the whole fact of honoring hunger fullness cues, eat when your body is hungry, just give your body what it's asking for. There's no foods that are off limits. It doesn't leave a whole lot of space for healing. And what I mean by that is the physical pieces of the puzzle that sometimes intuitive eating doesn't really help us navigate. So I'm saying there's a space for both. I'm saying that what I've seen as a root cause practitioner is my ultimate goal. I would love to get somebody to an intuitive eating pattern. Realistically, can most people that come in with a lot of health and metabolic dysfunction start with intuitive eating? Hell no. Right? It's like there's too big of a disconnect. There's so much that they don't know or understand about what their body actually needs to thrive that if they're listening to hunger fullness cues, that might be inappropriate, right? And I'll talk about some situations where like we might be so disconnected from hunger fullness cues that if we listen to our natural hunger fullness cues, we'll probably be making our hormone issues worse. Right? Or if we listen to, like I said, naturally what foods our body is craving, we might make our gut issues worse, right? So I think that there's a part of this, but also I think we actually have to have a period of time where we are coached with informed eating before we're going to be able to implement intuitive eating. That's what I'm here to say, right? What does that mean to think about like informed eating, right? And what does that mean to kind of look at some of the gaps in intuitive eating, which could be our goal, but we may not be ready to jump there just yet, and that's okay. So for somebody that feels kind of failed, I guess you could say, by the intuitive eating model not working for them, I get you. I'm telling you exactly why that model probably didn't work for you. And it doesn't mean that you're broken. Your body is not broken. You don't, like I said, need all of this like mental health therapy. I'm like, there are actually some probably informed eating strategies that we need to bring in first, which will then guide us towards being able to eventually adopt a more intuitive eating approach. Sometimes that's just not realistic from the jump, and that's okay. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I kind of boiled it down to 5 main reasons, or the 5 main reasons, or the 5 biggest harms, unspoken things that people aren't talking about with this intuitive eating agenda that kind of sometimes can fail people and make them feel like they were a failure in this intuitive eating approach. So diving in, here are what I would say are the 5 biggest harms that I've seen and why sometimes we need an approach before the intuitive eating approach. So intuitive eating does at its core, just because it's not talking about informed eating first, it ignores stress signals. And this is a very real thing that impacts a lot of people's ability to listen to their hunger fullness cues. So when you don't feel hungry, especially waking up first thing in the morning, is a very classic question I'll ask individuals. I'm like, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel hungry? And they're like, no, right? I'm like, that is a sign that the body is under excessive physiological and psychological stress, right? So in that situation, if we try to adopt an intuitive eating approach and it's like, oh, you're not hungry in the morning, that person could naturally probably fast until 11, 12 o'clock in the morning before they actually start to get hungry. And that is making their cortisol and stress issues worse. Right? So this is what I mean by, like, if that individual adopts an intuitive eating strategy, they're probably not going to get any closer to their goals because we're not correcting a lot of the underlying hormonal imbalances by just telling them to, like, eat when they're hungry, stop when they're full. I'm like, no, we need to restore these natural hunger fullness cues in the morning. You've been sleeping for the last 8 to 10 hours. Like, you should be hungry, right? We need to restore that versus just bypassing it. So stress hormones do naturally suppress natural hunger fullness cues. So some individuals that are running under high amounts of cortisol or like an adrenal fatigue picture, they probably don't have natural hunger fullness cues. So we need to actually retrain that first through an informed eating strategy before they're going to be able to do an intuitive eating strategy. Otherwise, they're probably going to spin their wheels. So surefire sign of excessive stress is going to be waking up without a morning appetite. So then you naturally skip breakfast, and that just ends up making your cortisol levels worse. Or eating breakfast and skipping coffee, or like the eating breakfast and skipping coffee, or eating breakfast before coffee is actually what that person needs. But intuitively, they wouldn't connect that together because that's not what they feel. Right? So they're not led down that path. And a lot of people don't understand that feelings like fatigue, energy crashes, headaches, anxiety, dizziness, irritability, inability to focus, like all of those are ways that your body is begging for fuel. And what do? If we naturally, intuitively listen to that, we probably grab an energy drink, or we grab some caffeine, or we grab some coffee, or we grab some sugar, right? And it's like, not exactly what your body was asking for, but you're like, but intuitively, that's what my body was asking for. I'm like, yes, I know. And that's where we need a little bit of an informed strategy first, because we don't know what we don't know. So number one, sometimes why, like I said, we need an informed eating strategy first is because it ignores natural hunger, or ignores stress signals and us not being able to interpret that. Number two, it also doesn't allow us to correct the role of blood sugar balance in the equation. So number one food principle, you guys have heard me talk about it time and time and time again, because it's true that all of my patients benefit from a nutrition strategy that involves blood sugar balance, right? So if you haven't taken my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass, it's there for a reason. It is my foundational nutrition course that I feel like literally everybody can benefit starting from there. And then we can always do deeper work from there. But do not pass go. Do not collect $200 if you haven't taken my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. That is helping individuals understand the informed eating strategy behind blood sugar balance before we're going to be able to intuitively eat. So I mean, if we really break it down, current statistics say that 93% of the American population is metabolically unhealthy. So that means that about 7% probably have a more balanced blood sugar and are ready to intuitively eat, right? But otherwise, individuals with blood sugar balances, it's a slippery slope, right? A lot of times the blood sugar dysregulation leads to leptin resistance. The leptin resistance causes excessive hunger, inability to feel satiated, and then progresses into full-on insulin resistance, right? So tell somebody with blood sugar imbalances to intuitively eat, they're going to eat all day long because their body doesn't have the natural satiety cues, right? That's normal, right? That's understandable. We don't judge ourselves for that. It's like, oh, we just need to come in with an informed eating strategy first, get blood sugar under control before we can really expect and trust ourselves to intuitively eat, right? So we've kind of talked about two scenarios with like excessive stress can sometimes blunt hunger fullness cues. Excessive blood sugar dysregulation can exacerbate those hunger fullness cues. So we got to kind of tackle both. Number 3 is intuitive eating. I don't feel like helps with nutrient deficiencies. So if somebody is struggling with various nutrition deficiencies and they just don't know it, sometimes just having them intuitively eat may not always fix the issue. So like, for example, I've seen a lot of times individuals with like a zinc deficiency, they naturally have an aversion to meat or protein sources. What are the best sources of zinc? Meat and protein sources, right? So it's kind of crazy because like meat is precisely what they need in that situation. But if they would intuitively eat with a zinc deficiency, they'd probably avoid a lot of meat and protein because they don't naturally crave it, when even though that's what they need, right? Or people with like an iron deficiency, sometimes they experience loss of appetite. Deficiencies in calcium and magnesium increase a lot of sugar cravings, especially for things that are like carbonated and sugary. So like soda, definitely thinking about calcium and magnesium deficiencies there. Or someone with a fiber deficiency, they're just straight up not eating enough fiber. They have poor satiety hormone release, right? Our classic GLP-1, GIP, CCK, leptin, all of those hormones. Often if we're not eating enough fiber, we're not releasing enough of those hormones. So you're going to be more hungry than the average person, even beyond your metabolic rate, right? So the standard American diet, very low fiber by nature, and also very low nutrients by nature. So I bet most people, if you just kind of gave them the strategy of intuitively eating and they're surrounded by the standard American diet and there's no informed eating, they're going to grab standard American stuff that's around them, and they don't necessarily realize it, but their diet then is void of fiber, void of nutrients, and they're like, I don't get it. I'm supposed to be able to eat when I'm hungry, stop when I'm full, drop into these natural hunger fullness cues. You can't do that on the standard American diet. You can't. It's designed to make you overeat. That's what those foods are for. Low fiber, highly palatable, very enlightening to the dopamine response of the brain. Like, they hire food scientists from these food companies to do that, to make food as addictive as possible, right? So you can't intuitively eat on the standard American diet. So there has to be some sort of informed eating strategy first that precludes an intuitive eating, right? You guys are kind of getting my point here. But I also think that going straight to the intuitive eating strategy ignores the role of gut health. I see this one a lot. Like, we've talked at length about how disruptions in the microbiome and digestion can alter normal hunger fullness cues. And that signals that we actually probably need some more work in the gut before we can even tackle an intuitive eating approach. So someone with insufficient stomach acid, low stomach acid, you're probably going to naturally reduce your consumption of animal-based foods. What do we actually need? More animal-based foods, right? So you can see how, like, intuitively, I see this all the time where individuals come to me and, like, somewhere along the lines in their adulthood, they kind of naturally became more vegan or vegetarian. A lot of times that's because of either nutrient deficiencies or poor stomach acid, right? And so it's like they were naturally listening to their body, which got them into that position to cut those things out. And what they actually need is an informed strategy to steadily reintroduce those foods. So you see this all the time. Inadequate bile production. We're going to have a lot of GI distress and diarrhea. So of course you're going to avoid fats, right? Even healthy fats. Or someone with a bunch of dysbiosis. Of course they're going to, like, avoid plant foods because they're hard to digest, right? But a lot of these things, it's like, it doesn't mean you eliminate those foods. It means that you fix, like, why am I having reactions to perfectly healthy foods? Why am I having reactions to animal products? Why am I having reactions to plant foods? Why am I having reactions to healthy fats? It's like, don't cut out the foods. It's not the food's fault. It's the gut. So if we intuitively eat, we're going to bypass all of that gut work, and we're going to try to intuitively eat into a pattern that actually is exacerbating the original problem. It's making it worse, right? So we're bypassing that. And then lastly, as much as there's, like, a great trauma-informed mental health component to the intuitive eating strategy, it also ignores a lot of different subconscious programming that people have had around food. Man, does food run deep into like childhood and like their lived experience and their learned exposures. There's so much like control and identity for people that's rooted in food and how they eat, like more so than a lot of people want to admit. But that's why I lean so heavily in a lot of mental health conversations and mind body conversations in my practice. Like people are like, you're a nutritionist, but you're also like my therapist. I'm like, yes, I understand, because you can't peel those two apart. A lot of times, like there's a lot of emotion and identity involved in food, and it can stem all the way back into childhood, right? Some have experienced trauma, food scarcity, diet culture from a really young age that makes people use food emotionally, despite hunger and fullness cues. They're like, I'm not even hungry and I'm blowing through a bag of M&Ms. I'm like, exactly. Like it's not always physiological hunger. So and like the intuitive eating strategy kind of sometimes dismisses that and makes people feel shameful that they're not able to feel into and honor hunger and fullness cues. And I'm like, no, it makes sense. Like it makes sense that you can't do that because we haven't had an informed eating strategy before we try to jump into the intuitive eating strategy. And then we judge ourselves when we feel like we fail the intuitive eating strategy. So as just like a big high arching, like bring this all together conversation, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, take it or leave it, I have seen that this intuitive eating is it's a little bit of a cop-out, right? A cop-out for lack of body literacy, to be honest. Like we're skipping this whole informed eating standpoint, and really what people everywhere, but specifically women, we need to be taught first. Like, who is swooping in and teaching women how their body works? We need a good support strategy first, learning about remineralization, maintaining and managing blood sugar, nourishment versus like diet culture conditioning, right? How about healing the nervous system? How about hormone optimization or circadian rhythm health? What about lowering toxin burden and opening our drainage and detox pathways, or setting boundaries in our life, right? I'm like, all of these things need to come in a very strong informed eating strategy first, because there's a lot of times where individuals, like, I don't care what intuitive eating says, like that food is probably doesn't make you feel great. And so even though intuitive eating says like all foods fit, I'm like, hey, to get you to your health and your healing goals, that may be something that we don't include right now, or include differently right now, right? So you have to leave room for nuance, and we have to leave room for gray area. And that's what I'm asking for with more of like a progressive approach here, informed eating, before we judge somebody who feels unable to like naturally intuitively eat. I got you. I get that. Like there's probably just some things that we need to work through first before you're going to feel confident adopting like a full-on intuitive eating strategy. So if you're a patient or a client or someone interested in more of, like I said, this nutrition health space, like this may click with you if you felt like, oh my gosh, I knew I didn't fit in that model and that intuitive eating approach, and like why that kind of continuously fails for me. And I feel like I judge myself, even though I know that I shouldn't, because I haven't been led through the informed eating strategies first. I'm like, yes, exactly. If you're a provider in this space, a practitioner in this space, maybe you work as a mental health practitioner, maybe you work in the health and wellness field in some capacity, and you're using some nutritional interventions right now, but you're curious about being able to add more to your arsenal, like this is a perfect conversation for you to kind of understand, because you may want to be an intuitive eating practitioner, but you have to realize that there's probably going to be a high level of individuals that aren't ready for intuitive eating until you've led them through informed eating. And if you as a practitioner and a coach don't know how to navigate that and guide somebody through that, then a lot of people tend to fall through the cracks with that. And so that's where, like I said, having platforms like this, I think, can be immensely helpful. So I think the best resource, whether you're a practitioner or whether you are a patient, I think my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass is definitely the first place to start here. That is a great example of an informed eating strategy that you can apply to multiple different scenarios for the rest of your life without feeling restrictive, deprived, but also feeling well informed and also customizing it to your needs. So jump over to the link in my bio. You can click there. It will direct you to my website. Scroll to the website about halfway down and you'll see my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. And that's something you can definitely join in on as well too. If you are part of my newsletter, you received a discount promo code for the month of September for my Master Your Metabolism Masterclass for $99 off. If you're not a member of my newsletter, snooze you lose. No, I'm just kidding. You can have the promo code. It's MYM, Master Your Metabolism. So all capital letters, MYM. That code will get you $99 off of my Master Your Metabolism class through the month of September. So join in, and that will give you an amazing example of an intuitive eating strategy for yourself. And whether you're applying it personally or even applying it professionally, it can be a really, really good stepping stone. So hopefully this conversation was valuable for you guys.